point I was making with it, the long-held belief, or that being the classical definition, wasn't about morality, actually. It was simply about the fact that what's happening with the redefining of marriage...
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
You were just talking about how marriage had been defined as such for that amount of time. And since that's been held for that long, we shouldn't change it. That was your argument.
Yes, I was objecting to the arbitrary redefining of it.
No, I mean, I think you were just making a different argument, even if it was in response to what Chris was saying. If your principle there is that it's been held for a long time, thus it is the right way to go about it. It shouldn't be changed. And I think that's stupid. Would you agree then that argument's stupid?
Well, let me clarify. I wasn't saying that it's moral because it's been done for a long time. That's not what I was saying. I was saying that we shouldn't...
Good.
Well, let me clarify. I wasn't saying that it's moral because it's been done for a long time. That's not what...
So it
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's he got banned, which
they're strict.
Harry Sisson and another member of his Low T Soy Boy crew gets absolutely demolished by this Hayden Rodia here on the topic of gay marriage. In the middle of Hayden schooling the two soy boy, he actually gets kicked off of TikTok for hate speech just because he says he doesn't agree with gay marriage. But let's see how this goes down.
Yeah, so I voted for Trump, ready to defend that as opposed to a vote for Kamala Harris. So happy to dive into the conversation if you guys are.
Sure. Why'd you vote for Trump?
Yeah, so I'd say largely because he's going to be more in favor of socially conservative policies, those namely being abortion, being against same-sex marriage, although I don't think that the RNC platform includes language that goes against same-sex marriage anymore. There's probably still going to be more people who are in his administration who would oppose that, even though I think the RNC themselves don't oppose that. And then in addition to that, issues like allowing men into women's sports I'd be against, as well as pushing gender ideology in schools and allowing children to physically transition.
Okay. Well, let me just understand something. So you don't support gay marriage, is that correct?
I do not, no.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah, so happy to start there. I will say probably like the primary social issue that I was concerned about was abortion, but happy to explain why I don't support gay marriage as well, if you want me to start with that.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah, so I would say that marriage is between a man and a woman. I think that if you make the claim that marriage can be between two men or two women, then you have to make the claim that marriage has absolutely nothing to do, or can have absolutely nothing to do, with procreation. I think if you accept that claim that marriage can have nothing to do with procreation, then you have to accept some pretty absurd consequences, which I'm happy to get into here. So I would say one absurd consequence of that is that there's really no reason to actually confine marriage to even being between humans, because if it has nothing to do with procreation, then I don't see any reason why there would be a problem. For example, if someone was to come along and say they believe a man should be able to marry his sex doll, or a man should be able to marry his pet.
I'm sorry, I'm just staring at these two as he's giving his answer, and they look so offended. They're like, why doesn't this guy want to just let us get married to each other? Guys, it's legal right now. If you guys want to run off and get married, go right ahead. No one is stopping you guys. All right, you guys could be happy together.
You're the stupidest fucking person we talked to today.
Okay, why is that?
Because if you have to go, look at my brother down here, man. Look at my brother down here. If you have.
So wait, is that his brother? But his name is Chris Mowry. His name is Harry Sisson. Are they half brothers? I don't know what the deal is with the soy boy crew, the Low T Soy Boy crew going on there. I have no idea.
Into all these like absurd scenarios to deny people like basic happiness, then I think you're really strange. And I understand that if you want to get into the logical conversation of, well, what about this? What about this? Just stop being a weirdo. Just let people be happy. Is that too complex?
Can I ask you a question about that?
No.
Okay, so you said that I would be denying people happiness, but wouldn't your position also be denying the happiness of the man who wants to marry his pet and the man who wants to marry his sex doll?
No, because marriage we don't just define as something having to do with procreation. We think that marriage can take different forms in different scenarios, and I think it does take different forms in different places all around the world, and even here in the United States. And I think like trying to go down that line of arguing of, well, that's what about the doll? The doll, marriage is a contract at the end of the day. A doll can't enter into a contract, neither can an animal. So I think marriage just takes on different definitions for different people, and trying to set like one definition of, it has to be this, especially when you're trying to get into the nitty gritty of, can a doll consent to a contract? You're being stupid. You're being like intentionally, contrarian. You just like to deprive people of what they want to do.
No, he's being consistent because see, the thing is your argument is you're trying to deprive The whole reason why we shouldn't stop two men from getting married is because you're depriving them of happiness. So if your logic, if your only reasoning is, well, it's taken away from my happiness, okay, so what if a man then wants to marry a doll? That would make him happy, and if you stopped him from doing that, wouldn't you be taking away his happiness? So what he's trying to do is to get you to dive in a little deeper there than just my happiness, but the happiness of the gays. Because if it's just all about happiness, then everybody should just be allowed to get married with whatever they want to, whether it's an inanimate object, what if they want to get married with 5 dudes? What if the Soy Boy crew, they just all wanted to get together and get married with each other? What would be wrong with that if it made you guys all happy? People do like to engage in polygamous marriages. So why shouldn't that be allowed if it makes all those people happy? He just wants you to dig a little deeper, Harry.
Okay, so one question on that. You mentioned that, for example, a sex doll can't enter into a contract, but you could have multiple people who do enter into a contract. So I'm wondering, on the basis of your position on marriage, would you be okay then with polygamy?
I don't think that in terms of like marriage, people could enter into a contract. I don't know how that'd work with, like, for example, with like taxes. How would that work with like a relationship like that? And also, like, are you saying that because we agree with gay marriage, we have to agree with polygamy in marriage?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what the standard is for a marriage.
Well, I do think there is, like, again, some ability to be like pragmatic in this sense and say that if you're coming up with instances where, because marriage is no longer defined as just an instance in which you can procreate, that, well, what if somebody wants to marry their, pet cat or whatever? That, like, again, if people bring up those concerns and we can figure out things like, as a country, like how it would work, filing joint taxes if you were in a marriage with multiple people, then, like, that's fine. And until somebody brings that instance up to a court, then I think what we have now is perfectly suitable.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, then,
I don't know that there has to be a clear standard set besides the fact that you can enter into a legally binding contract of marriage with anybody and you can't enter into a legally binding contract with someone who's not an inanimate object.
Okay, gotcha.
Not sentient.
So if there was a polygamous group of people, say 5 men and 5 women, they wanted to get married, they bring their issue to the court. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then redefines marriage to include relationships between multiple men and multiple women. You'd be okay with that?
Yeah, sure. If we can figure out the system of how that works with filing joint taxes and stuff, sure. Why would I care?
Okay. Do you have any concerns that maybe redefining marriage to include same-sex marriage and to include polygamy would redefine what a family is fundamentally?
No, please elaborate on that.
Mm-hmm. See, I would say that if we're saying that marriage can be between 2 men, 2 women, or 5 men and 5 women in the case of polygamy.
Well, again, I do want to point out we're not necessarily saying that. I'm just giving you the instance of.
Oh, okay. So at first he answered the question, well, yeah, sure. If you could just figure out the tax situation, then what do I care? So that he originally went from saying that, but now that he's pointing out the problems with polygamy, now he's saying, okay, well, I just want to make it clear that I'm not saying that.
Yeah, if we're redefining marriage, then we're necessarily also redefining what a family is. And I think that has some pretty rough consequences.
Well, I do want to also point out that, like, the only person in this live who supports redefining marriage as it currently stands is you.
How so?
Everyone else is. Are you supportive of gay marriage?
Well, no. So, yeah.
Right.
I could,
so currently, as marriage stands, Harry and I are okay with the current standpoint of how marriage is defined.
That's a fair objection in the sense that I want to redefine it from what it was redefined to about 9 years ago, right, with Obergefell. But my view of marriage is actually the one that has been traditionally held for significantly longer than the view of gay marriage. You do recognize that, right?
So what?
Yes.
So what? So
like slavery was a tradition in the United States, and like after slavery was abolished, you'd say that slavery was a tradition that's been held longer than free people. So what? So what if it's been held longer?
Well, for one, I would say that gay marriage is something that's immoral. I know you guys obviously disagree with that, but that is the question that's at hand, right? Is gay marriage something that's moral or immoral?
Yeah, that doesn't like respond to my answer at all, because you brought it up being like a long-standing tradition in the United States. Like, so what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that we shouldn't arbitrarily redefine words just because some people have their feelings hurt, right? So the term marriage historically.
Okay, well, I don't think it's arbitrary that Obergefell was decided. I think for you to claim that it was like arbitrary is really dumb. So like I'm still trying to understand why you think that just because it is the case that it's been held longer means that it's the right way. Because I think there are then you get into a really slippery slope of there have been plenty of traditions and beliefs that have been held longer than others, but that doesn't mean that it was right. So what does it being a long held belief matter?
Yeah, so the argument isn't, well, just because we've had it for a long time and therefore it's that there was a reason we had it for a long time. As Hayden's trying to point out, it's valuable to the structure of a family. That's why you can't have polygamy and all this. That's why you can't have polygamy and all this stuff, or a brother and a sister marrying each other, or two brothers marrying each other, or two sisters. Because having it between man and a woman is valuable to the family structure. And now that you have it to where it's two men who can't procreate naturally, or two women who can't procreate naturally, it's not as good as a straight marriage. And so now Harry's making the argument of, well, just because we've had it for a long time doesn't mean it's a good thing. Okay, well, how is heterosexual marriage a bad thing? How is that a bad thing, though? That's the thing. What was detrimental about having a man and a woman marry each other? What was harmful about that? You could point out the harms of slavery, and that's why we had to get rid of it. Slavery was very harmful to people. It still is harmful. Slavery is still around today, and it's a very harmful thing. But how is a man getting married to a woman and just having marriage between a man and a woman, how is that a bad thing? Objectively, it is not a bad thing. It's only bad to people who are just like, no, because it hurts my feelings and it hurts the feelings of gays.
The point I was making with it, the long-held belief, or that being the classical definition, wasn't about morality, actually. It was simply about the fact that what's happening with the redefining of marriage...
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
You were just talking about how marriage had been defined as such for that amount of time. And since that's been held for that long, we shouldn't change it. That was your argument.
Yes, I was objecting to the arbitrary redefining of it.
No, I mean, I think you were just making a different argument, even if it was in response to what Chris was saying. If your principle there is that it's been held for a long time, thus it is the right way to go about it. It shouldn't be changed. And I think that's stupid. Would you agree then that argument's stupid?
Well, let me clarify. I wasn't saying that it's moral because it's been done for a long time. That's not what I was saying. I was saying that we shouldn't.
Good.
Well, let me clarify. I wasn't saying that it's moral because it's been done for a long time. That's not what.
So it
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's like he got banned, which
wow, they're strict today.
I mean, well, for the record, I mean, that's he's just coming up here like arguing against people's like basic freedoms, because apparently if people in the LGBTQ plus community want to get married and they can't, we redefined marriage because quote people got their feelings hurt. Nice. Or because they were denied like a basic principle of like living in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about people like that when it comes to like LGBTQ plus marriage and rights is that they always frame it as like, oh, I disagree with the logic of it. Like, it doesn't make sense logically. If you really dig into their logic, number one, it doesn't make sense. But also, number two, you find that their logic is based in hate. So that guy's, it was just hate. He just doesn't like people.
I mean, he did say it was immoral. But for the record, yeah, I didn't kick that individual. He got banned. So, and obviously, for the people in the comments who are going to say, oh, of course he got banned. Like, Dean and Parker literally we all get banned so often.
It wasn't Harry and Chris's fault that the live ended. TikTok suspended me, and that is completely out of their control. What I was trying to say before I got suspended was that I don't believe same-sex marriage is wrong simply because the term marriage has historically been exclusive of same-sex relationships. I believe it is wrong because of reasons completely independent of the duration of time marriage has been defined exclusively as being between man and woman. But I also believe that we shouldn't completely redefine words just to be inclusive of groups of people who are upset that they have historically been excluded from a definition. Another example of this is the redefining of the word woman to include biological males who identify as transgender and are upset that they have historically been excluded from the definition of woman. What I'm trying to point out is that someone who is arguing to redefine the most important institution in human history better have a damn good reason for it, which I don't believe same-sex marriage advocates do. Still, I want to explain why I believe gay marriage should not be legal, and while I wish I got the chance to lay out more of my argument for this with Harry and Chris, I don't mind doing it here. If a marriage is simply a contractual relationship between multiple humans and has nothing to do with procreation, then what even makes it special? At that point, it is simply a contractual relationship like anything else, and there's no need for us to have marital laws at all. Marital laws are in place because they help protect the one flesh union of man and woman and the natural product of that union, children, which are a perfect symbol of the one flesh union since they contain half their genetic code from their father and half from their mother. Marriage as an institution is important because it lets men and women know the rules of their relationship before getting married. It lets them know how issues like custody, shared ownership of property, fertility, and parental obligations will be regulated after they are married. These issues do not affect same-sex couples because no offspring and no complementary union can be produced from two people of the same sex. Therefore, they have no need for their relationships to be stamped as marriages or recognized as unions by the state. To prove why redefining marriage is a bad idea, we need to recognize how the word marriage is used in language. Marriage is a noun, and marry is a verb. Consider the following sentence: Harry married a woman. Historically, people would understand this sentence to mean that Harry entered into a public covenant with the woman and then consummated the union with physical heterosexual intercourse. If there was no covenant, there was no marriage, only fornication. If there was covenant but no intercourse, there was only a contract. Covenant and consummation were both necessary conditions, with neither being sufficient on their own. Now consider the following sentence: Harry married a man. In changing the object of the verb marry from a woman to a man, we have now changed the definition of what it means to marry someone, since heterosexual intercourse can no longer be a required condition of marriage if two men can marry. After all, if two men marry, there may very well be a contract, but there could be no consummation, since there can be no heterosexual intercourse. Moreover, the contract is unnecessary for same-sex couples, given that laws around marriage are principally ordered around what it naturally produces: the one flesh union of man and woman, and the natural product of that union, which is children, something that is impossible in same-sex relationships. Advocates for same-sex marriage will argue that a marriage license grants them a host of legal rights to each other that would otherwise be difficult to obtain in some states apart from a marriage license. And this is a grievance that social conservatives should be able to empathize with without caving on the definition of marriage. Some rights heterosexual spouses have that same-sex attracted couples want include medical power of attorney, right to visit in emergency rooms, and shared ownership over property. Same-sex attracted individuals should be allowed to sign contracts that allow them all of the above, and they can do so with private contracts and without having their relationships recognized as marriages or unions by the state. If we redefine marriage, we redefine family. A family, in principle, consists of one husband, one wife, and their children. Because of divorce, adultery, adoption, and the death of spouses, a family may be extended to include stepfathers and mothers, as well as adoptive fathers and mothers. But even within such families, the terms adoptive and step are used necessarily to distinguish between how a family is structured in principle. In principle, a family is one husband, one wife, and their children. The intentional creation of a family that has two fathers and no mothers isn't possible without a gross violation of children's rights. If two men want a biological child, they will need an egg donor and a surrogate. In some cases, this can be the same person, but that is becoming less and less common, since a woman who is both the egg donor and the surrogate would be more likely to win custody should she contest it than a woman who is only the surrogate and not the egg donor. Civilized society should recognize a child's right to their father and mother, and consequently avoid the intentional creation of situations that deprive the child of one of their parents. Surrogacy differs from adoption, which seeks to mend a broken situation rather than creating one. Marriage laws are helpful to heterosexual couples because they govern what naturally proceeds from marriage, which is children. When a man and woman say "I do" and consummate their marriage, they know the set of rules that will govern both their marriage and what is produced from it. Married couples have unique legal needs due to the children they produce. Both parents and their children benefit from the stability marriage as an institution provides. Now seems an appropriate time to answer the objections I'm sure many viewers, possibly including Harry and Chris, have. Objection number 1. If marriage is only possible for those capable of producing children, then infertile men and women can't be married. This is false. I do not believe infertile men and women cannot become married. Infertile men and women who are still capable of consummating the marriage through heterosexual intercourse can be married. And while it is true their heterosexual intercourse won't create the symbol of the one flesh union, which is the child, it still results in a one flesh union and still has the natural capacity for procreation by virtue of the sex being between man and woman, even though one or both may lack the immediate capacity for fertility. Therefore, I can affirm that infertile couples can marry without supporting same-sex marriage. It is important, however, to note that should a man and a woman make a public covenant with each other and fail to consummate the marriage due to one or the other lacking the appropriate genitalia due to something like an accident, then it would be appropriate to annul the marriage, which is different from divorce, since an annulment would declare the marriage invalid and to have had no legal existence. Objection number 2. Marriage is about love, not children. You're right that marriage is about love, but a man cannot love another man the same way a man can love a woman. After all, every birds and bees talk starts with when a man loves a woman, and that's no accident. When a man loves a woman, he seeks intimacy and the fruit that comes with that. Moreover, historically, marriage meant so much more than just love. The institution of marriage has always been oriented around the creation and raising of children. After all, there used to be plenty of married women and men who may have professed to fall out of love with their spouse, but nevertheless remained in the marriage for the sake of the children. Love is an important component of marriage and is most often what causes its creation, but it's certainly not the sole purpose. When we redefine marriage to be purely about attraction and disregard the familial obligations tied to it, we fail to protect the interests of children and destabilize the foundation of Western civilization, which is the family unit. Objection number 3. It doesn't affect you. In the early 2000s, this objection may have seemed more reasonable, but we are now 10 years post-Obergefell, and it is quite clear that some same-sex couples aren't content with just getting their relationship recognized by the state. Instead, they want the state to force everyone, particularly Christians, to recognize it as a marriage as well. And this was always what was going to happen once same-sex marriage was legalized. The redefinition of marriage has always been about forced approval. Prior to its legalization, you either approved of the arbitrary redefinition of the word or risked being called a bigot. But now that it's legalized, you might not just get called a bigot. You might also get sued when you refuse to bake the cake, take the photos, or otherwise refuse to glorify that which has no glory. Oh, and you also might get suspended from TikTok for hate speech. Additionally, what our neighbors do in public has ramifications for society as a whole. What happens when you have to explain to your son or daughter why their classmate says he has 2 dads and no moms? What happens when your child sees a billboard advertising a wedding venue that features same-sex couples? And what happens when you have to explain to your children why the relationship between you and your wife is special in a way that can never be replicated by 2 people of the same sex? When our government fails to recognize that the natural capacity for children is what makes marriage so important, they fail to recognize what built the very nation they are trying to govern, and that is the family. Jeopardize the family unit and you jeopardize the future of your country. Objection number 4. Opponents of same-sex marriage are motivated by hate. Someone's motives have nothing to do with the validity of their argument. Still, I am happy to confess that I do not hate gay people. In fact, it is because I love them as myself that I refuse to both recognize same-sex relationships as marriages and refuse to recognize homosexual acts as a fundamental good. Homosexuality is immoral. It harms its participants and society as a whole. Just because 2 people consent to a sexual act does not mean it is moral. For example, some men and women get sexual pleasure from imagining themselves as amputees. Yet, if a man and woman consented to cutting off each other's limbs to get sexual gratification, I would affirm that both parties would be victims and perpetrators of an immoral act against each other. In the same way, just because 2 men consent to having sex with each other does not mean that their sex is moral. On the contrary, in the United States, men who have sex with men are at a 44 times increased risk of contracting AIDS, a sexually transmitted disease which is currently the cause of death for 16% of those who contract it in the US. Moreover, 12 to 13% of gay men in the US have AIDS, and Americans are currently footing the bill, with our federal government spending $43 billion on HIV in 2022, the majority of that being spending on mandatory domestic care and treatment programs through Medicaid and Medicare. If we are to truly love those with same-sex attraction, we will tell them the truth, which is that they need to run away from their immoral attraction towards individuals of the same sex and embrace the wonderful design God instituted for man and woman when he created them. That is one man, one woman, one time. As a bonus,
Everything Hayden said is absolutely 100% correct. You know, it's interesting that Harry Sisson and his the Low T Soy Boy crew, how they always every time I see them debate people, they always bring up the issue of gay marriage. Like, why do they always start with like why is that one of their main topics? Why is that important to them? It actually makes you question. Maybe there's a reason why Harry Sisson always gets accused of being a homosexual. Because I know it's like a running gag, like I know that, but is it something that he actually like no joke 100% is? Because for someone that's not homosexual, he seems to always want to bring up gay marriage. That's crazy though that he got kicked off of TikTok for hate speech. And obviously, even though Chris and Harry didn't personally kick him off, you could see how they absolutely had no problem with him being kicked off, because they see people like Hayden who don't believe in gay marriage as, being bad people or just being hateful. Even Harry himself said in the clip, oh, well, you could always see that it's out of hate, because they can't grasp this side of the argument. They can't handle it or grasp it. They've been too indoctrinated to think, yeah, no, but if it makes them happy, then why not? So then when we challenge them and say, well, if it's just about the happiness, then why can't these people get married, or this person get married to this, or what have you, if it's just all about happiness? And then they have to backtrack and go, well, and then they try to make up excuses. But then when you ask them, well, why is gay marriage important? And then they go back to the happiness argument because, well, it makes them happy. It's like a never-ending circle that just keeps going on and on. Yeah, stop being logical, please. Just stop being logical. Just stop arguing it. You're hateful. You're hateful. No. These people are utterly insane. But what did you guys think? How did you think this Hayden Rodia here did? This is my first video of his. I thought he did a pretty good job arguing his side. He brought along the facts. Sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you thought of this. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this. Smash that like button. And if you did enjoy it, I got some more content on the screen very similar to this that I think you'll enjoy.